Today's episode is brought to you by applaudable.net.
It's not so much how well you train or how well you work on the days you feel like it. The real test is how do you do it on the days when you don't feel like it.
Successful people tend to push boundaries and have a creative way of thinking about things. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
So with the pushing of boundaries, and I'm thinking that's the chapter Embrace the Suck, that possibly that's coming from. It's really about, with that one, particularly from an athletic point of view, it's managing that really uncomfortable moment in your sport, whatever it is, whether it be, whatever it is that you're doing. But particularly if we look at it in terms of physical discomfort or psychological discomfort, where you're just in that place where it's hurting. And I have to be very careful in how I phrase that, because I mean it's hurting as in you're uncomfortable, not you're in pain and you're about to get injured. So please don't push yourself beyond the boundaries, and then I don't want anyone to get an injury. But athletes often know what I'm referring to there, because it's that moment where it's almost like you at the crossroads and you go, do I keep pushing? Do I keep going through this next play? Or do I signal back to coach that I want to get, onto the bench because I'm tired and my legs are hurting and all the rest of it? And typically what a lot of athletes will say is when they opt out and they go, yep, I'm ready for a break, like they're sitting, and you would know this as in your time of all your experience with all your athletes that you've worked with, they sit on the bench and then they look at you and go, okay, well, I'm ready to go back on again now. It's almost like they kind of go, and there's almost that moment of regret that I opted out. Or, I've had that with runners who say I was running and then the next thing I knew I was walking. And why was I walking? Because I didn't want to walk, and I wish I'd kept pushing. Or, athletes who finished, I worked with a CrossFitter once who said, I got to the end and thought I knew I had more in me. So I guess it's that moment we're talking about. And so it's really about, and a lot of it is about psychological strategies, because what we do know is that the human body is often capable of far more than we allow it to. So it's almost like our mind gives up before our body does, that we tell ourselves we're fatigued, we tell ourselves that we're tired, we tell ourselves that we've had enough, and all of that kind of language, and particularly our language around how hard we're working. This is awful, this is terrible, this is the worst thing I've ever been through. If it's that kind of self-talk, it actually increases your fatigue and reduces your motivation, and then you are more likely to back it off or stop or ask for a sub, or whatever it is that you might do. So a really important skill for people to learn is that notion of pushing through, and it comes, the term I use in the book comes from the military. And you mentioned before, I do quite a bit of work with the military about that notion to embrace the suck. Because I guess in sport, particularly when you get to the pointy end and the higher end of it, is the whole reason it's elite is because it's tough, And so whenever we're pushing ourselves in any physical pursuit, if you hit the point where it gets tough, that notion that, well, wasn't this kind of the point? Isn't this, if I often say that to myself, because I'm more a weekend warrior. I'm certainly not an elite athlete, but as a weekend warrior, if I'm getting up at silly o'clock to train, then I'm not getting up to walk and have a lovely time of it. I can do that at 7, but if I'm going to get up at 4, then you would expect me to push myself. And when I hit that point of discomfort, I remind myself that's why I got up. And that's why I keep pushing through. And so that's how you kind of use that mental strategy to help move you through it, because it's very easy otherwise to then come away from the situation with regret. What I like about that as a concept, and I'd done some videos with a particular sport that had a competition on it at a particular point in time, and people had been watching it. Anyway, a friend of mine watched it who doesn't do the sport, and he came back to me and said, Jo, that video was really helpful. And I knew I knew the person didn't have that athletic background. And I said, oh, tell me how you're using that. And he said, I'm using it for reading. He said, I really struggle with reading. I know it's a good thing to do. I know I'll get a lot from it, but I sit down, I feel tired. I don't feel like reading anymore. And then I'm annoyed with myself the next day because I didn't read. So he said, I'm using that strategy for reading. And I think that's probably what I tried to do with the book as much as anything, is it certainly can be read by the athlete who wants to perform better. And there's plenty of athletes, I'm fortunate that plenty of athletes have read it from that perspective. But there's lots of other people reading it who just want to go, well, there's something about elite sport that they are working towards success or working towards bettering themselves or working towards being the best version of who they can be. And what can I draw out of those areas? What are those elements that can help me to do that? And that notion of pushing through, because the reality is if successful athletes only did things when they felt like it, they wouldn't be successful athletes. So it's not so much how well you train or how well you work on the days you feel like it. The real test is how do you do it on the days when you don't feel like it. So that's the challenge, isn't it?
So you just used the word challenge at the end there. One of the things that I'm constantly saying to my athletes myself is, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And they want to say, I can't do that, the old narrative, can't do that yet, and everything like that. And I just remind them, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. That's the change of state that you're trying to get to. If you're just comfortable, which is going to lead into this creative thinking concept. If you're comfortable in how you do things, so the status quo, things like that, and you're not challenging yourself, you're unlikely to necessarily drive forward. You're almost falling into that fixed mindset thing, I guess, there.
Thanks for joining us for a basketball conversation. Feel free to start a conversation of your own with other Ausswoosh superfans by commenting below. And I look forward to sharing our next conversation with you soon. I hope you'll join us again sometime. Catch you later.